Here we are again in Matthew. Today, we are going to talk about love. And no, I'm not talking about some Hallmark movie where they meet and they fall in love and everything works out in the end and it's just perfect. I'm talking about the love that God shows and that Jesus commands us to show. To dive deeper into love, we need to ask these three questions. Who do we love? How do we love? And why do we love? Let's start with the baptism of Jesus. After reluctancy, John the Baptist baptizes Jesus. John did not find himself worthy to baptize Jesus, and he really wasn't. But eventually he baptizes Jesus. And then comes verses 16 and 17 of Matthew chapter 3. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." I would like to come back and talk more about this after these next few verses. The next verses come from later in Matthew. "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." The first thing that I want to look at from this second passage is who we're supposed to love. It says it right there, to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you. That's a lot easier said than done. To love that bully at school, to pray for that rude coworker who's always rude to you and says mean things. It also says that if you love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, you will be children of your Father in heaven. And this is pretty cool because at Jesus' baptism, God says that he is very pleased with his Son. Now in this case, he is talking specifically of Jesus. But when we love each other, God is very pleased with us. And that's a reason why we love. We love in order to serve God. And our last passage comes from Matthew chapter 22, verses 34 through 40. Most of us have probably heard this before, but I'm just going to go ahead and read it. "Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, 'Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?' Jesus replied, 'Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments.'" So, how do we love? We love with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. But more importantly, we need to love God. There's a reason that loving God is the greatest commandment. Loving God means we follow his commands. And when you follow commandments and love God, it will overflow into the love that you can show for others, which is the second greatest commandment. And I've heard a pretty cool analogy for this. It's like if you have a cup. When you have a cup, you need to point that cup straight up for it to be filled. And it's pointing straight up and it's pointing to God. But if we try to go and get filled up by other people and the love that they show us, then we have to hold our cup out because all people have their cup at the same level. But a cup that's pointed outwards instead of upwards isn't going to get very full. And that way you can't fill up other people that well. But if we focus on God and we have our cup pointed straight up, he can fill us and then he'll overflow us and we can spill over into others. Another thing from this is that Jesus does a pretty interesting thing. So he gets questioned by these Pharisees. And these Pharisees came to try to trap him and trick him and find something wrong with him. They were Jesus' enemies. But what does he do? He answers their question. He doesn't get mad. He answers their question with love. He sets the example that even when our enemies come against us, we should show them love and we should share love with them. All that we do should flow out of love. whether it's helping someone who's in need or just not saying something rude to someone when we really feel like saying something. And if you still aren't convinced about loving others, remember the very basis of our faith. The basis of our faith is that Jesus came to this earth. He grew up, lived a perfect life. He died on the cross, taking all of our pain and suffering, and then he rose again. And if he did this for any other reason than love, he wouldn't have gone to the cross and he wouldn't have taken all of our pain. But Jesus loved us so much that he would do that for us. So this week, I want to challenge you, find 2 or 3 people that you think that you just don't like, that you would consider maybe your enemy, and find a way that you can love them and find a way that you can pray for them.